Okay, so the last time we talked, we discussed what my first day was like when I left and started over a few years ago. Well, the thing that happened within a couple weeks after I left and moved into my new home was I was in an accident that totaled my truck. So here I was starting over, and remember, I only had $400 to $500 a month coming in that I could use for expenses. So I had to make a decision about what I was going to do. I wasn't in a situation where I could depend on like Ubers and taxi drivers and things like that. I also was driving almost 2 hours one way to help with childcare for a grandchild that had been born premature. So I had to have transportation. Well, with no more coming in than I had coming in from my part-time job, I could not go out and get a loan. So I had to be able to replace my vehicle, and I had to be able to do it with cash I had on hand, which is why it's very important to have an emergency fund. It's very important not to ever spend everything you have in that emergency fund. Had I purchased a higher dollar house than I had, I would not have had the money to replace my vehicle. So that was something I did right when I left. And it's something that if you find out you are going to be in the situation I was in, then I would just caution you, always, always make sure you have a couple $1,000 somewhere where you can replace your vehicle with a used vehicle. Now, the truck I had was in really good shape. It was a very good vehicle. I had had it for several years, but it had been very well taken care of. I didn't have the cash to replace it with the same value. Now, yes, I had car insurance, but I needed to quickly replace my vehicle. I was injured in the accident, but I was not injured enough to have a hospital stay or anything like that. So while I was beat up and I was hurt and so on, I was still able to walk from my house down to a used car lot that wasn't very far from me. They didn't have a lot at that time. I mean, sometimes the guy had a lot sitting there, but at that time he was kind of low on used car stock. So I looked at what he had. I took an old truck out for a test drive, and it didn't seem reliable. If I was just putting around town, yeah, I probably could have done that one. But they did have a Tahoe there that was used, and he was very upfront. He told me, he said, look, he said, I can't guarantee what condition it's going to be in. It just came in. We haven't had a chance to go through it. So he said, you're buying at your own risk. And he said, I don't know much about it. I know they had been driving it, but then it sat for a while. But they did drive it in to the lot. So I looked at it. It wasn't rusted out underneath or anything. And I thought, it ran good. I took it out for a test drive. But I was pretty beat up at this point, so I really couldn't crawl completely underneath to where I could really see brake lines and this and that. So it handled well when I took it for a test drive, sounded great. I mean, was not in bad shape. Now, I figured it had sat for a while, and sometimes when a vehicle sits for an extended period of time, it can have things go out after you start driving it again. So I took it, and I had only been driving it a few days. I pulled into the gas station. I put gas in it, started to leave, pulled out of the gas station, got to the first stop sign, and my brakes let loose. I had no brakes. So brake lines had to be replaced. Then I was driving home in a thunderstorm, and I mean, it was torrential. Lots of wind, lots of rain. You could barely see where you were driving, and suddenly my vehicle became very hard to control. And at first I thought, oh, okay, maybe it's the wind, plus we've got wet roads. Well, I got home, and the next couple days driving it, it still was not handling well. And found out that, and I can't remember what it's called, but like a stabilizer went out, which can make your vehicle very erratic. So that had to be replaced. So fortunately, I had purchased a vehicle that I didn't have to lay a lot of cash out, which meant I still had some funds left. And in the meantime, I did get reimbursed for my insurance. So I was fortunate enough that I did have the funds, and I actually got more back from my insurance than what I spent on my car. But because I had to replace it very quickly, I didn't want to take a chance on spending more than what I would be getting back from my insurance. And I didn't know how much I would get back from insurance. So I guess the whole lesson here in this experience was, don't spend so much money that you don't still have an emergency fund. Because you can put yourself in a very precarious position then. Had I done that, I would have been in a really bad situation. Because I took any of the money that I got back from the insurance to replace my truck, I put that in savings, because I was living on such a short shoestring. I knew that all that money had to go back into savings in case of an emergency. And it was because I got that money back, and instead of spending it, I put it back in savings, that I was able to buy the parts I needed and get my vehicle fixed. The forethought to not spend that money, even though there were things I needed to do to my house, and there were, living expenses itself. I was not spending money on anything. And having that money is what kept me from faltering when that vehicle needed to be replaced. And I only spent what I absolutely had to repair that vehicle. And I left everything else in savings, which is really good because almost 7 months to the day, I was driving through a town after dark, and just as I approached an intersection, a drunk driver with no insurance and no driver's license ran a red light and totaled my Tahoe. I mean, what are the chances? Do you ever feel like the whole world's against you? In that moment, I mean, all I could do, I was so close to that intersection, all I could do was hit the brakes and hold on for dear life. My airbag exploded. I couldn't even see, I couldn't even see what was in front of me until the airbag deflated, and I looked up and I was sitting right at the corner of somebody's porch. And fortunately, I did not hit the house. There was a few feet there, but I just remember looking up, looking around. I saw the other vehicle off to my right, and I looked up and I saw this young woman running from a discount store across the street, hollering, "Do you have kids? Do you have kids?" And I saw a man, because there was like the screeching tires, all that. And I saw a man running out of a garage, like a professional car garage, and he come running hollering, "Is she okay? Is she okay?" And and I looked up and I went, "I'm okay. I don't have any kids with me." But this young woman had seen the car seat, and she was just coming out of the store, and she saw the guy run the red light. The other guy thought he saw him run the red light. So at least I had witnesses. And I remember, they got to my vehicle. They saw that I was okay. I looked up and glanced over and said, "He's gonna run." And the girl started hollering, "He's running, he's running." And this man ran and he got the license plate number. So we did have a little bit of information, but there again, my vehicle was totaled. So they called a tow truck, and the police came and rescue came and everything. And they asked me if I was okay, and I said, "No, I think I'm okay. I'm just shook up a little bit." And, gave my police report. The witnesses gave their report. They had the license plate number. And just to make a long story short, when the police ran the tags, they told me a couple days later when they called to kind of just update me on what was going on. They said that he was a person of interest that they had been alerted that he was in the area, but they could not find him or his vehicle. They just kind of seemed to disappear, and they couldn't find him. And the guy that drove the tow truck was the one that actually picked up on the fact that, because I didn't know exactly what vehicle it was, but he left pieces and parts of his vehicle at the scene. So we had, between my recollection, which when you're in an accident, your brain's just not working that quick. But between my recollection and what the two witnesses said, our descriptions didn't match up exactly, but they were close. And the guy from the tow truck's like, this fender should not have been on this vehicle. So they knew that there were a couple just discrepancies on the vehicle. It was an old one that had been patched together with parts off of different models. So that made it a little more difficult to find him. But a few months later, they did call me and say, we did get the guy. They said, we're not sure because it's been so long, we can't prove for a fact that he was inebriated because they didn't have the evidence for that, and so on and so forth. But anyway, that vehicle was totaled, and because it was a little older and it just was not valued at the same as my previous vehicle, which was a truck. So I did get some insurance money, but I did not get as much insurance after that accident. But I'm sitting in the same situation. I still don't have a lot of money coming in. My divorce was still not settled, so I didn't have support. And so basically I was back to, what do I have in savings? I still wasn't to a situation where I could go out and get a car loan, and I wouldn't have wanted a car loan anyway because I like to live debt-free. I understand in emergencies, sometimes you get pushed into having to get a car loan in a situation like this, but to be honest, I wouldn't have qualified for a loan anyway. So it was kind of a moot point. So I was back to, what can I get from a car lot and pay cash for it? So because I had put the insurance back from the previous accident, I had a little bit of money in addition to what the insurance company gave me this time. So I had a little bit more that I could spend to replace my vehicle. I still was adamant that I did not want to spend everything I had in savings. So I was very firm about not going any higher in price than what I had received from the insurance payments. I looked at what they had on the lot, which, again, they didn't have a lot in my price range. I mean, it was a big dealership, so they had lots of cars, lots and lots of pretty new cars. But as far as what they had in used cars, they had several, but most of them were out of my price range. So I literally bought the least expensive car they had on the lot. But I was fortunate in the fact that it was low mileage. There wasn't a lot of mileage on it, and I got it for what I could pay for out of pocket. So that's how I decided what car I was going to get. It wasn't because I picked it out and said, this is the car that I would love to have next. It's because it was what was on the lot that I could afford to pay for, and I could replace my vehicle quickly. Because, again, driving about 4 hours a day, I needed something quickly. And it has turned out to be a good car for me. It's not a truck. It's not a large vehicle that I could haul things in. And let me tell you, when I'm hauling lumber and things to do home renovations, I get a lot of strange looks in the parking lot at Menards. So it's been kind of a journey, but it's a vehicle. And sometimes, you know what, you have to get what you can afford, and you have to make it work. And that's what I've done. So it can be a journey, and it can be a challenge when you're starting over, especially if you're starting over on a low income. But it is doable if you're willing to do with what you can afford. And I guess that's the whole point of this video, is to know that you can make it even when you're in a very precarious situation, and you may have to settle. You may not always get what you want, but you can do it. So that's number one lesson. And number two lesson is never, ever deplete your emergency fund to where you're in jeopardy if you have another emergency. Because I'm telling you, things happen in threes, whether it's deaths, whether it's emergencies, it always comes in threes. So you can't totally deplete your funds. You've always got to be prepared, no matter how little income you have, no matter what your situation is. If you've got a savings, if you've got that little emergency fund, even if it's not big, it's the difference between being able to make it and not being able to make it. I have known people that it was literally the difference between having a roof over their head or living on the streets. So this whole thing was not to make you feel sorry for me, but to see the importance of having an emergency fund, especially if you're on a low income. You need that emergency fund more than if you've got a lot of money coming in. Because I'll tell you, if I had been working a good job where I was making several $1,000s a month, I could have saved up and gone and got a vehicle, even if I didn't have any emergency fund. Although I don't recommend that for anybody. Having a little put back for a rainy day has saved me more times than I can count over the years. And I just would really encourage you, make that a priority. In fact, make that a priority even before you get your bills paid off. Because if you're trying to pay your bills off and you don't have that emergency fund, then when something breaks or if you're in an accident, then you've got nothing to fall back on. But if you have that emergency fund, get it built up to $1,000, $5,000, whatever you think it's going to take. And anything under $1,000 to $2,000, it's not going to go very far. So get it up to where you can replace an appliance, you can replace a vehicle. And do that. And then once you have that emergency fund, then start working at paying your bills off. Do whatever you can to become debt-free, because the only way I have made it over the last 7 years is by having an emergency fund and living debt free, because it gives you so much more wiggle room and the peace of mind. I can't even describe how it feels. It feels so good to be debt free. So that's my encouragement for you today. Just remember, no matter what your situation, you can dig yourself out, and you're going to make it. You're going to make it. So you have a great day. We'll talk again soon.